Friday, July 3rd, 2020. A new furry documentary came out called The Fandom. I went on a roller coaster of emotions as I watched this well put together piece of furry history, explaining how the fandom came to be and how it has impacted people's lives in a positive way. I'm Kit Ulf. Join me as I discuss my views on the documentary The Fandom and reflect on my own experiences with the furry fandom. The Fandom is a documentary produced by Ash Eagle, Ash Coyote, and Chip Fox. It features interviews with various people in the fandom, from founders of the first furry convention, Mark Merlino and Rod O'Reilly, to modern icons of the furry fandom like Sonic Fox. It includes interviews with artists, writers, fursuit makers, con chairs, a broad spectrum of the fandom. The documentary bounces between telling the story of where the fandom started and modern experiences of the fandom, tying together how similar and different the fandom experience is. It's presented in a visually appealing way, using animation, home video footage, filmed interviews, and graphics all tied together very well. I learned very interesting things like who invented fursunas.
Ken Sample quite often would draw this little cougar guy that looked an awful lot like Ken. We started calling that character Ken Cougar. We thought, hey, we should have our own character too that's actually us.
How the first FurCon basically looked like some of the first year cons I've gone to. I liked learning about Conference and the birth of Anthrocon. I also appreciated the fact that the fandom wasn't afraid to discuss topics like sexuality in the fandom and the alt-right fur problem. By not shying away from these topics, it treats the audience like understanding adults. Oh my gosh, I really enjoyed the home video footage segments of this documentary. It was neat seeing how the foundation of the fandom was laid out before I was born, and how FurCons went from room parties and club meetups to full-fledged conventions on their own. Seeing the home video footage somehow made the experience more visceral, tangible. I mean, it's one thing to read about how Conference got started, and an entirely different thing seeing footage from it. It stirred in me an odd blend of nostalgia, pride, and curiosity. It felt familiar, comfortable. When the video first came out, Twitter was all on fire, and not all of it good. Some people were complaining about, "You didn't have this," or "Where was that?" Of course, it's the internet. Drama and controversy are to be had. Would I have liked it to have been a little bit more in-depth? Yes. Would I have liked to see things like how the fandom developed in other countries? How fursuiting became so popular? When did the practice of con badges begin? When did dance competitions replace masquerades as the big ticket event at cons? I don't think a lack of an exhaustive deep dive should distract you from watching the documentary in the first place. Actually, it looks like there's going to be a series, so there may be more opportunities to learn about the different aspects of the fandom. Overall, this was a great documentary covering the basics of the fandom and its history. It actually got me thinking about my own furry journey, how I discovered the fandom and my participation therein, and I think I'd like to share that with you. I am an 80s baby. I grew up on DuckTales and Rescue Rangers. I read all sorts of animal-related nonfiction books I could get my little paws on. Throughout my life, there were little things that would nudge me ever so closer to discovering the furry fandom. Some werewolf lore here, the Red Wall series there, a brief stint on Neopets, a how to draw anime book featuring Kemono. I think when I first discovered furries was online in high school. I was really into webcomics at the time, and werewolves were something I've always enjoyed. I started toying around with the idea of making online comics. Often my pitch stories involved werewolves, because, werewolves. So one day I was looking into werewolf webcomics. What I stumbled into was a comic about a human who, through mad science portal shenanigans, happened to find himself in a furry universe, and that somehow or other, him being in that furry universe made him a werewolf? I can't remember the name of this comic, but I remember that the human character was actually made a werewolf so that it could technically be hosted on this werewolf comic site. Point is, the anthro characters in the setting fascinated me, and it actually got me looking more and more into related comics and these characters. After high school, I had to put my life on the shelf for a couple of years, and I wouldn't get back into the furry fandom until about 2007. I was in college and getting back into some of the old sites I had frequented in high school, specifically Gaia Online. Oh boy, looking back on that site, it was a mess. But one of the things I used to do was play in forum RPs. So normally I did werewolf games, but eventually I stumbled into a game with furries. I liked the idea and was still stretching my artistic muscles. I was working on artwork for people's characters, and I vaguely remember furry from high school, so I started looking around for examples of art to help me. Art led to looking at fursuits. Fursuits led to looking at fursuit videos, and fursuit videos led to Anthrocon videos. I know it sounds cliche, but I finally found that my legs were not just my thing, not a weird thing I was into, but that others were into it, and I felt like I belonged. A couple years later, I discovered Fur Affinity and made Anthrocon 2011 my first furry convention ever. And the rest, they say, is history. I love the fandom. It was a door that opened the world to me. I went places I probably would have never gone to. I met friends I probably wouldn't have met otherwise if it wasn't for the fandom. It pushed me to try. It led me to discovering more about myself and was a place where I could be me with all my weirdness without being judged. I want the fandom to keep being a place where people can be safe to be themselves and discover themselves. I can't wait to see more of what this documentary series will produce. I'd recommend watching the documentary in its entirety. I'll put a link for it in the description below.